All right, so for more, we are joined by crime and violence expert, Professor Jacob Mofokeng, and forensic scientist, Dr. David Klatzow. Gentlemen, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us today. Perhaps, Professor, let's begin with you. I mean, we saw there the SAPS ballistics section head, Brigadier Mishack Mkhabela, giving his testimony today at the Madlanga Commission, giving quite some startling findings with regards to how they work within that department. I mean, even making comments such as there are 29,000 firearms in storage that are linked to a criminal case with only 42 analysts to handle the workload. What did you make of his testimony and the significance of the detail and the data that he gave to us today?
Well, good evening, Kataho, and good evening to Dr. Klatzow as well as the viewers. Well, in a country already, battered by violent crime and a waning faith in law enforcement, the revelation today by Brigadier Mkhabela, that we have such huge backlogs, of forensic ballistics that needs to be, processed. He also made mention of over 108,000 cases, that are waiting review. It just points to a justice that is, bit paralyzed, if not fully paralyzed. It is a betrayal, of victims. It's a gift to criminals, and it provides with a statement that the state is unable to be able to provide a safety for the citizens in South Africa. So he did make mention of, processes, administrative processes, of which he did indicate those are part of the red tapes. But then it shows a lack of accountability where, victims or those that are waiting the reports as well as the courts, they will wait forever. I remember 18 years ago when IBIS was introduced, it was promised that it is the best system, ahead of US as well as UK, where it was anticipated that within, 14 days, it will be able, those forensic or the investigators being able to be provided with information to be used in a court of law. But here we have, the most expensive systems, with a lack of, human resources, but as well as a lack of accountability, to be able to be utilized fully, optimally, considering the amount of millions that the South African Police Service, is paying, for the service of such systems. So it is unfortunate, wherever administration, is seen to be a roadblock as well as a hindrance for the efficient utilization of ballistic, systems in South Africa. Yeah. This is it's where we are talking about only 42 analysts, to process more than 29,000 of which, you'll also need to, effective monitoring of those that are utilizing those systems, because he also indicated that, if wrong people are brought into the system, they can only, make as if they went through those processes, but not.
Sure, quite alarming. Dr. Klatzow, I mean, I want to get your feeling with regards to the revelations that were made today. Prof saying that there certainly is a justice that is paralyzed. Were you alarmed with regards to some of these numbers that were revealed today?
As I love to say, I'm going to have a heart attack and die of not surprise. The situation is dire. It is. I've been warning about this situation now for more than 20 years, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. The forensic labs, which are the key to many court cases, not every court case, but many, many court cases, and particularly the criminal justice system, are blocked up in, and the causation of that blockage is manifold. There are many, many causes that are hindering the process. Let's start at the beginning. The quality of analysts that you get today is very poor. And there's a huge staff turnover at the laboratories, And the reason is very simple, that an analyst coming in as a warrant officer is earning, I might have the rank wrong, but he's earning, the average fellow who comes in is earning less than 2,000 Rand a month. And they are then faced with enormous amount of work and pressure and work after hours, and they're just not interested, so they leave after a few months. That's the first problem. The second problem is that the system that is used is dependent on IBIS. The brigadier seems to be a little confused about that, but it's IBIS, Integrated Ballistics Identification System. And what that should be able to do is should be able to sweep through rapidly and give you a list of potential suspects that are in the memory of that system. But for some time, that IBIS account was not paid and was non-functioning. So that IBIS account resulted in not being able to do that, which meant that people in Natal couldn't compare bullets with people in the Transvaal or anywhere else for that matter. So that produced huge backlog, and it also impeded the ability of officers on the ground to actually do their work. Because if you don't have an ability to communicate with your fellow officers, you won't know whether the same weapon is being used in Johannesburg or Cape Town, or with a week apart killing people in Natal and in Johannesburg. So that's a disaster. The third problem is that for a while the automated computerized evidence system that is used at the laboratory for retrieving evidence from the storerooms and making sure that things don't get lost, that fee was not paid, and so that stopped working. So it meant that things had to be done manually. Disaster. Things get lost. Now, that's only part of it. I haven't started to go on to the actual mechanism whereby they actually do the comparisons. And the brigadier, I'm afraid, is probably 15 years out of date in his understanding of how ballistics comparison is done. It's changed completely over the years. And there's a lot of information out in the literature about how it should be done and how it is not being done. I dealt with a case just before a few years ago where 62 cartridge cases were linked to the criminals or the accused, and the 2 ballistics officers from the Cape Town laboratory claimed in court that they linked the cases. By the time Advocate Mitchell and I had finished cross-examining them, they couldn't link a single case out of the 62. Now, that should tell you something. It should warn you that there's a problem. And then there are so many other ways in which the poor quality staffing results in evidence which is unusable. I have in my files a number of cases, and this is not exhaustive, but I've got a number of cases where one person identifies the weapon as firing the shot and another person identifies it as not firing the shot. Now, one of them's got to be wrong, and great things turn on that sort of information. It's a disaster area, and it's a disaster area which will not come right until somebody examines the system and starts to make some positive, useful changes.
Right. There's
another problem which has come into it, which I need to just tell you, and that is that ballistic microscopes are expensive pieces of kit. They cost somewhere in the region of between 3 and 4 million Rand a throw. Now, at one stage, of the 30-something microscopes at the laboratory in Johannesburg, in Pretoria, at Silverton, of the 30-odd microscopes, I think there were 2 or 3 that were working. Now, it takes great skill to break one of those microscopes. And I don't know how they did it, but they're apparently buying new microscopes, which hopefully will not get broken within the first 6 months, but I'm not holding my breath. And I don't know where to make it go right at the moment, because until you actually identify the key problems, until you make a diagnosis of what is wrong, you can't institute treatment.
So, Dr. Klatzow, I mean, you're speaking about that diagnosis of seeing what could have gone wrong, but you also mentioned that you were giving warnings as far as 20 years ago. What raised alarm bells for you then?
Lots of things. You must remember that in the mid 80s and mid 90s, I was one of the only forensic scientists doing work outside the police force, and I came across cases where there were things that were completely wrong. And I'll give you one example. The Gugulethu 7 is a good example of a case where the ballistics experts got it completely wrong. And eventually, having trashed me or tried to trash me in court, they had to come along to the TRC and admit that I was correct at my original assessment. The other case, which never fails to upset me, is the case of Ashley Creel, who was a young activist in the Eastern Cape, who was murdered by two policemen, one of whom is now dead, but the other one I think is still alive. And those two people were never brought to justice. They murdered him, and the ballistics evidence given in that case was not even good enough to be wrong. And that went for not only the police ballistic expert, but the Cape Town University forensic expert who gave evidence.
Prof, I mean, yes, all right, finish your thought there, Doc.
So having had 40 years in this business examining these things from the outside looking in, I can tell you that there's much that worries me, and I've been trying now for the last 3-4 years to get interest up in people examining the system, finding out what exactly is wrong. And the problem with that is that everybody within the system works on secrecy. Very few of them will come outright and say, this is the problem. They will obfuscate and pretend that it's okay. It's not okay. It's not okay when you can't buy equipment to do you can't buy the consumables to do the DNA testing. It's not okay when you can't buy the kits to take the DNA test results,
right,
and buccal swabs and things of that nature. It's not okay when your level of your man on the ground doing the day-to-day work is so poor that he can't do the work properly, and they're overloaded. They probably have 30 or 40 times the number of cases that anybody else would expect to do on a reasonable basis, and that leads to mistakes. And those mistakes lead to tragedy.
And we're finding ourselves in these situations. I mean, Prof, we are hearing here doctors speaking about the IBIS system not functioning. That also leads to a lot of the results not being known, whether a gun has been used in a multiplicity of crimes across provinces. And in fact, the head of ballistics actually did touch on that in saying that only afterwards they were able to discover that a few guns were used, and it even led to them believing that these guns were being hired by different gangs at different times, but used on a continuous basis. What does that say to us, even by just that brazenness of gangs being able to use those guns interchangeably? Prof. Mofokeng?
It talks about not just bureaucratic, failures, but also moral failures. What we are hearing at Madlanga Commission as well as ad hoc committees, it's a lack of leadership and accountability within, the criminal justice system, preferably within, the South African Police Service. And it is a session, that if individuals are so ambitious that they just want to be leading entities without really, justifying on merits whether they are capable, as well as, taking the interests of South Africa at heart, then we will be confronted with these issues that we are discussing, this evening, which is, we are giving a message then, like what Brigadier indicated, that you find that at the scene of CIT, you find around, over 100 cartridges. The question then is where these criminals buy, a lot of ammunitions without fear, and then they use, without really sparing such ammunitions. So it says that, violent crime, those that are doing it, they get away with it. The state is snoring, and then there is a lack of leadership, there is a lack of morale, within those that are leading these entities. So it is something that, if we are talking about reforms, as much as we can have state of the art, the guest made mention of, there will be times where, these licenses will not be renewed for IBs. So that means that cases will not be processed. Then who is accountable for this? We also need to see an active, portfolio committee, not only to provide us with a lip service, but also to hold those that are accountable, to task. Otherwise, it will be this kind of information that will make us to be overwhelmed, but there will be a lack of accountability.
There's another thing that I need to just interject, if you don't mind.
All right, Doc, maybe let's just hold that thought. We need to take this break at this moment, but please just hold on to it. We definitely will pick it up as we return. We are speaking about the ballistics expert that appeared before the Madlanga Commission earlier today. You can also give us your thoughts. Make sure that you give us a call or send us a WhatsApp, but we'll be back after this. Welcome back. This is the late edition, and we are discussing the events that happened today at the Madlanga Commission, where a ballistics expert was just giving a recount of the situation and the scenarios that they are often faced by. We are joined by crime and violence expert Professor Jacob Mofokeng and forensic scientist Dr. David Klatzow. Now, Doctor, before the break, we were still discussing the impact of a non-functioning IBIS system, and you wanted to add to that.
I wanted to add two things to that. The first is that when just before COVID struck everybody and destroyed the world at large, there was an amnesty and 500,000 weapons were handed in. Some genius up in the top echelons of the police force decided that everyone would have to be ballistically tested. Now, can you imagine what a sudden influx of 500,000 weapons will do to the workload of the people there? Are we surprised that they're going behind? That's the one thing. The second thing is that somebody asked rather naively, where are the criminals getting the ammunition? Well, you might want to ask somebody high up. Maybe we should ask Mr. Chelly how he did on finding out who stole a container load of ammunition from Durban. I think it was Durban docks, containing more than 1 million rounds of 9mm ammunition. Now, where did that go? It didn't. It certainly couldn't have been done without inside information, and it couldn't have been done without the connivance of somebody in the police force, and probably somebody conniving with the criminals. And the problem we have today, and it's becoming more and more worrying with this commission, is that it would appear that I used to say the only difference between the police and the criminals was the uniform, but clearly that's changed, and the only difference today is that the criminals have got a better work ethic.
And that's quite worrying, Prof. Mofokeng, if we are speaking about the criminals being more organized than the police themselves. When we speak about the morale of the South African Police Service, I mean, we heard from the brigadier earlier on speaking about how a former ballistic unit commander was arrested for contempt of court because he couldn't appear before the court because he didn't have the evidence from ballistics as he needed to at that particular time. If we're speaking of the workload in terms of what they're faced with, how does this then impact the morale of the service in its entirety?
Well, it negatively affect the morale of those that are functioning within that particular, environment. But also, what we also had that, for one to be able to link the hits, one has to spend almost a minimum of 8 hours per day to be able to observe as well as to be able to at least submit a report. So in a case where, despite that they come with a critical skill, allowances, if the environment then is not conducive for individuals to function, it will be a case whereby individuals will come within the system, they will be trained, they become expert, but because of the environment or lack of leadership within, this environment, these individuals, of course, they will have to look for greener pastures. So the reports that we are getting at both these entities of Madlanga as well as ad hoc committees, it might provide with a bit of, light to indicate that probably then the environment is not that as conducive as it's supposed to be. It is not only about ballistic, but also DNA, processing where around, is it March or May, where we see that there is escalation over 140,000. So it shows that a criminal justice system is now actively facilitating impunity, allowing dangerous offenders to walk free, not because they might be found to be innocent in a court of law, but there are no cases that will be presented in a court of law. So that particular individual had to be, arrested because he was, subjected to a tremendous pressure to indicate that, well, we provided with this particular request that by this time you are supposed to provide with evidence, like what Brigadier indicated, that instead of him, analyzing some of these cases, he had to spend time, in front of the courts to be able to provide with, expert witness. So these are the challenges that, of course, are confronting South Africa. But here we are dealing with, symptoms of crime. And, if we have to really to look at the reforms in the holistic criminal justice system, something different has to be, suggested, but also, for administration, as I did indicated earlier, that it hampers, service delivery. Whoever is challenging the processes when, adverts or posts are advertised, perhaps that particular person or those people have to be brought before the portfolio committee, so that we can be able to check whether, this challenges, is it for the best interest of South Africa, or because they want to bring certain individuals in that particular environment. It points to what? It points to what we are hearing, that individuals, they really want to see themselves leading these organizations without really taking interest on the welfare of the South African communities.
All right. Maybe let's just then get your parting shot and your last words, Doc. I mean, if we are speaking about a system that really is weakened in the way that it has been weakened, do you think that criminals are enabled by the fact that they know that these loopholes exist within the South African policing service?
I think that's the understatement of the year. And in fact, the fact is that crimes are being committed with the almost certain knowledge that you won't be brought to book. The conviction rate is in low single figures for murders, and gender-based violence. There's a program that's going out on SABC, or it's just gone out, where I've participated, on gender-based violence, where it's called Klatzow Looks into Darkness. And the amount of gender-based violence in South Africa is frightening. But I just want to end on a slightly more positive note, lest you think I'm a Jeremiah. The positive note is that there are a couple of cops in the system. There's a small number of cops who are doing a darn good job, who are trying their level best to work on it. But once you've got corrupt officials at the top end of the system, it makes their life very, very, very difficult. And that those honest cops need to be weeded out and found and promoted and put into positions where they can make a difference. And the bad apples, and it's more than just a few bad apples, it's bad barrels of apples, need to be taken out of the police force, and they need to be punished, and people who are abusing the system need to be taken out of the game altogether. And we need to get our National Prosecuting Authority, which at least said soonest mended. We need to get the National Prosecuting Authority. I mean, it's now how long since we had the Zondo Commission? How many senior ANC officials who were fingered in that commission are wearing orange overalls?
Right.
Not many.
None whatsoever. Prof, maybe your parting shots. You did make mention a little earlier on about having an active portfolio committee. What do you think are the legal reforms that we could look into that would be necessary to strengthen oversight and accountability?
Well, it is essential, but also we also need to bring what government has been really, shying away from, public, private partnerships. It is essential that we need to be able to look towards that particular direction. But also, apart from, any legislative reforms, we need capable individuals that will be able to provide with ethical leadership within these entities. Those people, individuals who are accountable not only to the president or to the minister, but to be able to understand that those offices that they are occupying, the nice expenditures, the vehicles that they are driving, is because of the, the taxpayers' monies. So we need that kind of moral regenerations of those that are leading us within these entities to be able to serve the country.
All right, gentlemen, thank you.
Could I add one last thing for Professor Mofokeng?
In 10 seconds, Doc.
Listening to you, it seems to me that you and I could make a very useful contribution if we put our heads together. I think that I could add value to what you're doing, and I've got no doubt that you can add value to what I'm doing. And it would be very good if you would provide the station with your number, and I will contact you during the week, and let's see if we can get something useful going.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. And thank you for that initiative, Doc. I mean, it's very important as active citizens to be the ones to step in and see how our own efforts can really contribute to making the country a better place. Thank you for joining us. Those were our experts, crime and violence expert, Professor Jacob Mofokeng, and forensic scientist, Dr. David Klatzow. Thank you so much for your valuable input this evening.